Hello patrons, welcome back to another tutorial. So in this video I'm going to be painting an owl using watercolours. So I have got the reference photo attached below for you guys so that you can follow along with me, and I've got the reference photo in front of me as well. It's important to always be looking at your reference photo whilst you're doing the drawing. So like I said, I'm going to be using watercolours, and I'm also going to be using the black Inktense pencil first, but you can use black watercolour instead if you want to. So I've got it all sketched out, and what I'm going to do first is block in the blackest parts, so the darkest areas of this piece first. So I'm just going to look at the reference photo and just shade in anywhere that's black or nearly black. So quite a lot of the markings on the owl will be black. Once you add water to this, it becomes really dark, so you don't need to add lots of pressure to the pencil at all. You can just shade it all in. So I am doing this piece quite big. I'm actually doing it as 12 by 16. So that is quite big. And I've listed all the materials that I'm using for this below. So I'm using the Arches hot pressed watercolor paper, which I really like. It's one of my favorite watercolor papers to use. And I'm using the Winsor & Newton professional watercolors as well. So I really recommend having an accurate sketch before you go in and start to do all of the painting. So you can get an accurate sketch many different ways. So you can transfer it or use the grid method or freehand it, it's up to you. I have got a whole tutorial series that I did last month of how you can create a really accurate sketch. And I go through those 3 different methods with 3 different examples. So if you want to learn how to get an accurate sketch, then make sure you check that out. So I'm basically just following the sketch and shading in anywhere that needs to be black. So this will take a while, but it's worth doing because this establishes the basic structure for the whole of the bird, and it makes it start to look like the owl. So for this style I'm going for quite a loose look. I want it to look very flowy and make the watercolour do a lot of the work. I don't want it to look super realistic. I just want to get the essence of the animal down, like the movement, the expression and everything like that. But I'm not bothered about making it look photorealistic at all. So what I like about using this Inktense pencil is that with a pencil you can get a lot more control and you can get those little details. So I like to use this for the first stage because it allows me to have control early on. And then once you've got the structure in, then you can go and be a bit more loose with it. So I'm just going to continue to do this throughout. I'm not going to be doing anything different, so this will probably take me about 10 or 15 minutes. So if you want to fast forward the video, then you can, but I'm just going to concentrate on doing this now for the next 10 minutes. And I'm just going to be doing the exact same sort of method. So I like to use the black Inktense because this one is light fast. A lot of their other ones aren't completely light fast or have really bad light fastness ratings, I've noticed. But the black has got an excellent light fastness rating, so I don't mind using this. I would normally be using my black watercolours, but I've run out and I am waiting for it to arrive. So in the meantime, I'm just using this for now. So it's important to look at the direction that these markings are going in, so the little black markings. So I'm just following the direction and the shape. You don't have to get it exactly like the reference photo, but getting the direction and the shape is important. It doesn't matter if it looks messy, because when you add the water, all of this and all the pencil strokes are going to go away anyway. So you can apply this technique to any sort of animal, and I tend to do this stage first anyway. Okay, so now that I've added all of the ink tints, I'm going to go in with the brush with some water and I'm just going to blend it all out. So I'm going to start off with the size 6 brush. I'm just going to clean it so that just water on it. And I'm going to start blending out the eye area first. So you can see straight away how dark it makes it. You can blend it as well towards the shadowed areas inside the iris. So I'm just going throughout and I'm blending it all out. I'm being a bit messy as I do it, so it's not all like uniformed, but I am still looking at the direction that the kind of sections are going in, the bits of feathers. So now I'm just adding water to all of these little spots here. I want to keep it quite quick. I don't want to spend too much time doing this, because the more time you kind of spend doing it, the more you're thinking about what you're doing, and I want it to be very loose and watery. Well, yeah, loose rather than being sort of all structured. So doing this is going to help me establish all of the shadows where all of the main markings are. As you can see, it already looks like an owl. You can tell it's an owl. So that's good. So you don't want to add too much water, otherwise it won't kind of stay intense. It will be a lot lighter and it will be more of a grey wash. You'll also see more of the graininess show through. But we're going to be layering lots of other colours over the top anyway, so don't worry too much. I'm just blending this area out with a bigger brush. So again, this can just be quite a tedious process, but it is a really important one. Everything else becomes a lot easier because you can just add lots of colours over the top because you've already got in the base shadows. You already know where all the darkest areas are, and then you can just glaze those colours over the top. So again, if you want to fast forward to skip this process, I'm just doing the exact same thing. I probably need another 5 minutes or so just to go over the whole of these areas. So there is a bit of graininess shown through, and that is one thing that I'm not too keen on with these Inktense. The fact that there is quite a bit of graininess showing through. But once we layer other colours over the top, we won't see that, and it won't be a problem. So I'm just trying to blend out some of this graininess of it. Okay, so now I'm going to work on the eyes, and if you look at the reference photo, the eyes are really red. So I'm going to start by adding a base layer of red first. So just a light wash. I'm going to add a light wash to this eye as well. And now I'm adding more concentrated red. And now I'm adding really intense red. I'm also going to add some darker blue mixed with purple to the pupil. So I'm also going to add some more of that black Inktense to the pupil as well. So I'm just going to add the shadow on this side as well. Add a bit more red. And I'm adding the blue and the purple to the other side. So I'm going to add a bit of brown. Okay, so now I'm going to work on the other areas. I'm just going to blot this area here. Just adding some more of the Inktense to the area whilst it's wet. Okay, so now I'm going in with blue and purple, and I'm going to layer it on all of these black areas. I'm going to go in with a large paintbrush. So it's the 26 round. And so first I'm going to wash some of the brown in some of the areas. So some of the more shadowed areas, I'm going to leave some areas completely sort of free of any colour. So I'm just looking at the reference photo, and some areas that are whiter, like this area, I'm going to leave clear for now, and I'm just loosely painting in the base sort of colour, which is the brown. So I'm not adding this absolutely everywhere. And we're going to be adding lots of different colours. So just pick out your base colour for your animal and just sort of loosely blot that on. Okay, so nearly done with this. And remember, it does dry a lot lighter than it looks when it's wet anyway. So bear that in mind. I'm going to add a bit of orange to the more saturated areas. Just add it to the wet sort of areas. Remember, you don't have to copy the reference photo exactly. It's just there for guidance. Now I'm going to add a bit of purple. It's best to do all of this whilst the painting is wet, and then it kind of all flows nicely together. You don't get any real harsh lines, and it looks more loose and expressive. So when you do this kind of painting style, try not to go too overboard with all of the colours, or if you do, make sure you're picking colours that work nicely together. Otherwise, when you add all of the different colours when it's wet, it's just gonna all merge together and become sort of a mess, probably. So what I did with this piece was I got the reference photo and I hyped up the contrast really high to kind of see the underlying colours. So there's a lot of blues, a lot of oranges, some purple tones. So that's how I decided to use these sort of colours. And they do work nicely together. I'm going to use some blue. So I am going to be doing another tutorial soon where I talk about how you can pick colours that you know will work nicely together and work harmoniously together. Because I think that is something that can be really difficult when you're trying to plan a piece, is figuring out what colours you want to use and that go together and that work nicely. That can be really difficult to figure out. So I think it does help working a bit bigger. You have a bit more kind of freedom and room for error, I suppose. I'm liking the way this is looking with all the different colours. I'm going to add a bit of green to the background. I'm going to overlap it onto our owl, so some of the colours from the owl bleeds into the background. So I'm going to add some green. You can bleed that into your owl as well. I'm doing more of a blue-green though. And up at the top I'm going to add a bit of blue. To give a look of the sky. So add the blue in for the sky, just dot it around. Getting some darker blues as well. Add some purple to the ear and bleed it into the background. Same over here. Gonna add some brown to the top of this ear. Do some little drips. I'm going to add a bit of yellow as well. Yellow is quite a strong colour, so I'm not going to use it everywhere. Now I'm going to go and intensify some of these colours. So I'm going to add more blue to the beak. When I hyped up the saturation, the beak was nice and blue, so I'm going to really hype up that sort of, what's the word, concentration. So it's a thicker concentration, it's more concentrated. I'm doing these quick little flicks to get in some of the little feathers and the direction that they're going in. Add some more blue over here. So I'm just blotting that. Adding some more purple over these black areas. When I hyped up the contrast, the black markings were very much like a purpley blue colour. So I just want to add the purple first. So now I'm going to add some more blue to the black markings. I might use a bit more of the black Inktense in a bit as well over these markings. Add some purple. It's good to layer different colours as well. Helps build up the intensity. I really like the blue look on the beak. I think that looks really, really cool. So I'm going to add a bit more blue on some other areas just to help even it out. Also varying the sort of intensity of the blue. Some areas I'll use more water, and on others it will just be quite thick. So with the owl, because the head has got a lot of different like little markings, this means that you can layer lots of different colours and really get a really cool sort of look by doing that. Gonna add a bit of purple to the beak as well. To help get that intensity. Just gonna blot some of this area. Want to make sure I'm not making every area too dark. Okay, add a bit more purple to the darker areas. Gonna add a bit of watered down purple onto this area here. And some of this bluish grey tone. Now I'm using some more of that Inktense and rubbing that onto this paintbrush. But again, you can just use your black watercolour. I'm using this to get in some of those darker areas and to help go over those darker markings. So I'm just rubbing that Inktense pencil onto the wet area. So I'm just adding the black to the darkest areas. Going to add a bit of black to the beak. So I'm just adding all of these little dark markings. Use some of the purple as well. Going to add a bit more blue to these markings on the head. I'm just going to add a little bit of the orange. Add a bit of reddish pink. So I'm just going to add this to the eyes. I want the eyes to be nice and bright. Adding a thicker layer for the shadow as well. And a bit of like blue purple to act as the shadow. Just adding some more blue to the pupil. Okay. Just going to create some little splatters. Add some yellow to this area. So this is the final thing that I'm going to do. Before we wait for it to dry. I'm going to create some pink sort of splatters. Okay, so now I'm going to wait for that to dry, and then when I come back, we're going to add in the fine liner and white gouache. See you in a bit. Okay, so now that all of the watercolour is fully dry, I'm going to start going in and adding all of the details using the black fine liners. And I'm going to work my way from the smallest up until the larger ones, and I'll be using the larger ones to get some broader, thicker pen strokes to give a bit of variation. But the first one that I'm using is the extra small, and this is the Faber-Castell Pitt Artist pen. And I'm just going to be using this to kind of define some of the main structures, the different markings, and just give it a more illustrative look. So I'm going to start on this side, and I'm just really outlining certain points, certain edges. just to give a bit more structure to certain areas. I'm going to do it in quite a scribbly sort of style. Because this is a bigger piece, we can do most of the work with larger pens. So you can use it to create any little details or just define certain areas. It's up to you how much of this you want to do. You might not like this sort of style, and that's fine, it's up to you. I just like the look that it gives. I'm probably going to be doing most of it with some of the larger pens though, because this one is really small and it doesn't really make much of an impact. But it is nice for when people are looking up close to the painting, they'll get to see some extra little details. So I'm going to switch over to the F-sized pen, and this is a much thicker pen, so the lines will show up a lot better with this pen. As you can see, it shows up much better. So I'm going to use it on these little black markings to add some detail, add what direction they're going in. Especially because the watercolours have mixed a lot together, so you've lost some of that sort of dimension and definition, sorry. I'm going to thicken up this outline over here. Add some little scribbles along it so it's not as rigid. So I'm just going to continue throughout the whole of the drawing doing this. I just like to jump around, and if I spot an area that I think needs to be defined a bit more, I'll just do this to it. Or if any sections need to be like become a bit more natural towards the ends, I'll create some little feather strokes. It is important what direction you do your scribbles in, even though it's very scribbly sort of motion, you still need to have the correct direction. Also remember, we will be going in with some white gouache and some white gel pen to add in the highlights as well. So for the darkest areas, I like to do more intense scribbles and then just create some looser ones around it. I'm also using this to create some little feather strokes in between the different markings to give the impression that it's a clump of sort of feathers. So I'm just doing this to all of these really dark markings. This area here is supposed to be quite dark as well. So I'm adding a lot of scribbles quite close together. Now I'm going to go in with the broad nib, so the B. This is like a brush, so it's like a brush nib. And this is for the thickest lines. So I'm using this to define the sort of main structures. So because this is a bigger sort of painting, you can get away with using bigger pens like this. If it was a smaller piece, I wouldn't go up to this sort of size because it would be too like overwhelming on the piece, but because this is such a large piece of artwork, it's okay to use this. Just going over the markings. I'm being a lot more careful when I'm using this black pen as to where I'm actually using it. This isn't the kind of pen that you need to use everywhere, otherwise it will just look too much. Okay, so nearly done. Adding all this black pen. You can really see that this brush nib has definitely added a bit more structure to the piece. Going to create some little details inside this white bit of the end of the eye. So I'm just looking around the reference photo and seeing if there's any areas that I want to add a bit more detail to, or strengthen and darken up and define a bit more. But I think we're pretty much there with this bit now. We can just go in and add the highlighted areas. Just going to add some of the extra small on this line to build this bit up. Okay, so now I'm going to mix some of the white gouache together with some water. And I'm going to add this to any areas that need to be lighter, or to make any little details that I want to make. So if we start up near the top, so I'm making some lighter feather strokes that overlap onto the eye. So I'm going to be adding lots of little white bits in between the top of this head, in between all of the little markings, just to break it all up and make sure it's not too dark up here. Also, when you add the white gouache, it looks whiter when it's wet than when it does when it's dry. It becomes more translucent when it's dry. So it might look like it's really white when you're putting it on, but it probably will get a bit sort of darker, and you'll see more of the underneath layers. So if you want some more opaque gouache, then use less water. This will give you a thicker sort of mixture. Just painting on the highlights. I love doing this step. I think it just brings everything together and makes everything pop a bit more. So if the mixture feels a bit thick, then just add a little bit more water. So take your time with this part, because you don't want to cover up all of the watercolor texture that you did. So you can go back over this white gouache with the ink pen if you need to. So this will help fix areas as well if you went a bit too dark on them. But just bear in mind that if you cover up areas with the gouache, then you'll lose that watery effect in those areas. So I'm doing quite a lot of work on this area, but I'll leave some of this area just loose and flowy, but the kind of main face area I want it to be pretty accurate, so spending more attention and detail in these areas. Add a bit more water to loosen it up a bit. So I'm adding some longer feathers in this area. Adding more details to the head now. So I'm adding the impression of the lighter feathers, creating that sort of detail just on top of some of those dark markings. Now I'm going to add some thicker, more brighter highlights. Just going to add a bit more white. Create some more areas where it's just this sort of white colour. Just to really hype up that contrast. Okay, so now I just want to create some splatters with the gouache. Using my bigger paintbrush. I'm going to create some more just want to make a few of these areas pop a bit more. Just add in some of these whiter areas. Sometimes nice to use a bigger brush because you can just get in broad strokes. Now I'm going to create some little splatters. Okay, so now I'm going to let this fully dry, and then I'll be back and I'm going to hype up the saturation. This is looking a bit dull. See if I need to add any more gouache anywhere else, because like I said, it can dry a bit sort of more translucent than it looks when you put it on. And just add in a few little tweaks. Okay, so I'll be back in a second once this is dry to add in the rest of the details. Okay, so now that the gouache is all dry, the last thing that I want to do is hype up some of the saturation on some of the areas. So what I'm going to do is use my Faber-Castell Polychromos, and I'm just going to use them to hype up the saturation, make it a bit brighter and a bit more colourful. So the first thing that I'm going to do is perfect the eye area. So I'm first going to go around the outside of the eye with a black pencil. And I'm also going to layer some purple over it, a purpley blue tone. Because I don't really want these areas just to be black, because it will look very flat. And these colours go really well over the top of the watercolours. I'm not going to take the pencils right to the edge of the sections because I still want that watercolour look. But I just want to add a bit more saturation to certain areas and make it look a bit more vibrant. So I'm going back in with the black. I'm also adding a bit of dark indigo, which is like a very dark sort of navy blue. I'm going to add the purple as well up here. Okay, so onto the eyes. So I'm going to add a base layer of like an orangey red. So it's called like scarlet red. And then we're going to be layering some darker reds over the top. So I'm going in with the Alizarin Crimson, which is a bit more of a pink sort of red. Just going to layer that. This is where the shadowed area is up here, and a bit in this inner corner. Now I'm going to go in with the Indian red. And I'm going to blend that up into the dark indigo and purple that we've added up here. To create this natural red looking shadow. Also going to use a bit of the white just to create a small highlight. And I'm just blending that out at the edges with a bit of this brighter orange. Just a nice subtle little shine. I avoided going over this highlighted area. I add just a bit of blue to the top part. Okay, so that's that eye done. So I'm going to add some more purple to these markings over here. I'm basically just overlapping the same colours that's already there, but just with these pencils, just to make it more vibrant. I'm not changing anything. I'm just picking out certain parts and enhancing the colour. You can work like colour at a time, so for example go throughout and do the whole of the yellows or pinks for example, or you can work around the certain sections and perfect each section and move on then to another section. I think I'm going to work colour by colour, so I'm just going to go around and add all of the pinks first. I think that will make it easier so I don't have to keep switching between all of the different pencils. But I'm trying not to go towards the edge because I don't want to lose that watercolour effect. So I'm just adding it to certain parts of the kind of splattery area. I'm going to go in now with the yellow. So I'm just picking out the key sort of areas. Now I'm going to go in with the cadmium yellow, which is more like a light orange rather than a yellow. I'm going over some of the lighter washes of orange. Now I'm going in with a darker orange, so it's called dark cadmium orange. I'm using this on the more shadowed areas of orange. So I'm going to be adding a lot of like vibrant colours to this area because I think this area looks quite sort of dull and like muddy, all the colours merged in together. So I want to separate some of those colours a bit in this area. Now I'm going to add some of the blue, work on this beak. I'm not even really looking at the reference photo at the moment. For this part I'm just going off what's already down. I'm just enhancing what's already there. Gonna add some purple. Want to layer some blue over the top as well. Add a bit of pink. I'm now going to work on this eye. So just like I did before, I'm adding a base layer of the black. I'll be adding some of the purple colour as well. So now I'm adding some of that purple. Adding some of the purple to this area as well. I'll overlap some black as well. I'm going to add a bit of the blue to this more sort of highlighted area. And so again, I'm adding a base layer of the scarlet red to the iris. Add a bit more of a lighter orange in the middle to like burnish it and get rid of any graininess. I'm going to add the Indian red for like the shadows. And I'm adding some of the indigo blue down and blend it with the Indian red for the shadows. I'm only doing this very lightly. And I went in the opposite direction to the direction that I applied the blue, so that I didn't have any of the pencil strokes showing through. Add some purple as well. Do the same on this side. So add some of the blue and the purple, and then go over it with that Indian red. And that creates a nice natural looking sort of shadow. Then if you want to go darker, just repeat that same process again. And there we go. So I'm adding more blue to this beak area now, and some of the darker sort of purple. I'm adding some of this blue purple to the darker markings because I added it to this area, so I want to keep it all in balance. So you can still see the pen strokes showing through from the fine liner earlier, but it just helps add a kind of glaze of colour over the top. Add in some more blue. And some more orange. Add a bit of yellow to this area. Gonna add a bit of green to this background area. Just give it a bit more saturation. Also add a darker green for the more shadowed areas because I don't want it to look grainy. And add a bit of blue to the sky. So now I'm going back in with the yellow and I'm adding some larger areas. Okay, so I'm just looking around and seeing what else I want to change, but we're pretty much there now. Again, I'm going to add a little bit of white to the middle section of this iris. To add a bit of shine. Can add a bit of blue as well to this area. Add some white. I'm going to add a little highlight inside this iris here. Maybe going across there. Now I'm going in with my white gel pen just to add any more little details. Any little scribbles. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it for this drawing. That's the majority of it done anyway. I don't think I'm gonna do much else to it. I might just have a little look and see if I want to change anything, but nothing too major. I'm pretty happy with it as it is. I'm just going to add and lighten up some areas with the white pencil. But yeah, so that's it for this tutorial. If you gave this a go, please remember to post it on the community kind of page, and I'd love to see it. And also I'd love to see if you try it on any other animals. Let me know what you thought of this tutorial and what you learnt, and I will see you in the next one. Bye everyone.